We are going to talk about a very simple idea which is at the core of this book, Multipliers, and that is that leaders can be multipliers to their organization, that they can actually use their intelligence, their genius, to bring out and utilize all of the genius on their team. And not only can they do it, it might be their most important job as a leader. I want to take a few minutes to give you an overview of these ideas, but I think we're going to show the book trailer because through the magic of editing, this little video can do it faster than I can do it. So why don't we go ahead and show that?
What is the fate of the smart and the talented? The corporate world finds smart, talented people and promotes them into management. But many of these leaders never look beyond their own capability to see the full genius on their team. Have you ever worked around someone who made you feel smarter and more capable? We call these leaders multipliers. Have you ever worked around someone who made you question your own intelligence? We call these leaders diminishers. They may hire smart people, but they quickly put other people in the background. They are smart leaders, but they shut down the smarts of others. Diminishers come at such a high cost, they waste talent and intellect that sits right in front of them. Organizations can't afford diminishers. I worked in senior management at Oracle for 17 years, and I worked around a lot of really smart executives. I saw how some leaders literally shut down brain power in the people around them. Yet other leaders seem to amplify the intelligence of the people around them. These leaders were multipliers, intelligence multipliers. I saw this pattern with other executives, and I was determined to research this to find out why. My first discovery was my research partner, Greg McEwen, at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. Together, we studied 150 leaders in 35 companies over 4 continents in pursuit of one really big question. Why do some leaders drain intelligence while others amplify it? Multipliers come from all walks of life, from corporate boardrooms to our school's classrooms. They are leaders like Lutz Ziob, Bill Campbell, Wangari Maathai, and many more. These people are real, and the way they lead can be learned and it can be developed. What would happen in your organization if you operated more like a multiplier? Imagine what is possible with access to all the intelligence that sits in your organization.
And in addition to the book, I think everyone's been given a copy of the book. There's also a Harvard Business Review article that came out in May, which is more of a bite-sized version of this, if anyone is interested in that. The message is very, very simple. It's a message of utilization. It started in this simple observation that some leaders seem to bring out intelligence. They seem to access more intelligence in other people. What is it that they do that utilizes so much brain power? Why is this a relevant message? It's a message that's relevant for the world of distributed intelligence. I think it was Stephen Johnson in Emergence who made this great observation that organizations that can access the most brains will win in the market. And we're seeing more and more business models about how do you access intelligence in the marketplace. This is a message about access. It's also a message that's particularly relevant for many organizations who are facing the economic reality that says that you can't grow top-line revenue with a linear increase in resources, that you have to find some deep leverage inside of your organization. And for some organizations, they find that they might be able to fuel some of that growth and some of that scale by better accessing the brain power that sits right in front of them rather than doing it through recruiting and adding more resources. It's really a message of scale. What did we find when we did our research? We found that multipliers and diminishers differ in a couple fundamental ways, mostly how they think, and then we found 5 things they do very differently, and the panel and I are going to be talking about what each of these leaders here, Bill, KR, and Ray, have done to be multipliers. In the most fundamental way, we find that they see the world very differently. Diminishers see a very few smart people. Intelligence is something that is elite. They happen to be one of those people who's really smart, and so they end up managing from a framework, a mindset, that says people won't figure it out without them. They become the central intelligence of their organization, and you can imagine how they lead based on this assumption. And you can imagine the problems that they have trying to grow and scale organizations when they're doing the thinking for their organization. How do these diminishers lead? They tend to, when it comes to managing talent, they tend to be empire builders. They love to bring in smart people, but then they grossly underutilize them. Those people are almost there for display of intelligence. What kind of environment do they create? They tend to be a tyrant, and they create anxiety and pressure and stress. And any cognitive psychologist will tell you that under anxiety and stress, people don't do their best thinking. In fact, the front of the brain shuts down, the amygdala takes over, people work to survive. They stop taking risks, they stop thinking hard. How do they set direction? They tend to be know-it-alls. They set direction based on what they know, what they see, their vision. Now, this may be great when an organization is small, but it's really hard to get scale when one person is doing the thinking for the organization, because no one person can know what's going on in a world of distributed intelligence. How do they make decisions? They tend to be the decision maker. They make isolated, inner circle decisions. They're often rapid deciders. The problem with this is, what I would offer to you is that every important decision inside your companies gets debated. Every one of them. The problem is, when those decisions are made early and quickly and in isolation, where does the debate happen? It happens out in the hall. It happens at the water cooler, in the parking lot, as people are confused and can't figure out how to implement it. They make quick decisions, but they leave the organization reeling because they don't know how to execute. And they tend to be micromanagers in every detail. Multipliers, what we found, see the world very differently. They look out on a room of people and they see a lot of really smart people, and they're hungry to access it. They know that the critical skill of the next century is not necessarily what they know, but can they access what everyone else knows? They have this assumption, because there's so many smart people around them. It's very simple. People are smart and we'll figure it out. In fact, we heard that, I think Mark Pincus said this in the digital breakout. He just turned to the receptionist and said, we've got a great big decision about, our PBX box and what to do. She's like, you're smart, you're going to figure this out. It's that mindset. People will figure it out without you. How do they manage talent? They tend to be magnets. At first, we thought they were great at spotting genius out in the market and attracting it. We found actually genius and talent finds them, because they have a reputation as the place where people get used and stretched and grown. Their environment is one of liberation. They give people permission to think, they give people permission to fail, and they create an environment where people can do their best thinking, but in exchange for that space, it's like a deal. I'm going to give you space and permission to think and fail, but in exchange for that, I demand your best work. I want it all, 100% of it. They're challengers. Instead of setting direction based on what they see, what they know, they ask the hard questions, the big questions. They make people really, really uncomfortable with stretch. So uncomfortable that people have to close that gap, and they move forward to assume really big, hard challenges. And how do they make decisions? They're debate makers. They know for the most vital decision, they have to get all the brains in the room with the data and make decisions based on fact, not myth. And lastly, how do they drive for results? They're investors. They give ownership to other people. They play the role of teaching, of coaching, of prodding, etc. But in exchange for that ownership, they've earned the right to hold people accountable. And I think what was probably most fascinating in our research, and the last point I'll make, is when we studied this and we looked at how much capability these different kinds of leaders got from people, we found that diminishers got less than 50%. 48% was what came out of our research. I like to think of it as you have to put 2 heads in their organization for every 1 head of brain power that you get back. Multipliers, on the other hand, got twice the capability virtually 100%. And what was fascinating to us is people said, you know, working for these multipliers, it was exhausting, but it was exhilarating. I couldn't wait to go back to work to do it again. When people described working for a diminisher, it was absolutely exhausting. And isn't it interesting that when we give half of our capability, it's exhausting, but when we give it all, it's exhilarating?